Okay, so as you can see, I roughly cut out the pattern, not along the cut lines, but just roughly cut it out. And then what I did is marked where the waistline is all the way across. And this is the straight waistline, okay? And that's at your natural waist. This is the curved waistline that they take from the natural waist. So what you're gonna do is mark the waistline. You're gonna mark your hip line, and sometimes they have a marking for the hip line, and most patterns are 9 inches below the waist, okay? But their waistline marking is, where's it at? Right here, but it's 8.5 inches below. And my waistline, so remember, these are your verification lines that we do, okay? So this is your waist, this is your upper hip line here, and this is the lower hip line. My lower hip line from my waist is 9 inches. So this is where mine falls, okay? And this is where the pattern falls at 8.5. So I just put a dash line there so you can see where that is. But that's why it's important to know, take your measurements and see where your measurements fall. So again, mine is 9 inches from my natural waist. So that's where my lower hip line falls. So I marked that. And your upper hip line is just half between your lower and waist. So that's where mine falls, and that's 4.5 inches, okay? Now remember, when you are marking your pattern, you go ahead and mark, make all the markings in darker ink, okay? So you know where everything is. We already went over that. And I always do it, make an extra mark on where my hip is. So they didn't have it here, even at their mark indication. So I just put an extra mark there, and feel free to mark up your pattern, you know, how you want to mark it up so you'll be able to match it up. Okay, so from here, what I do is actually measure. So I'll take this measurement times 2, because remember, this is only half of the, this is the front, so half of the front. So you take this measurement times 2, now you're going to subtract the dart, because you remember this dart is going to be closed. And I want to say this was 1 inch front. Yeah, I think it's 1 or 1/4. I can't remember right now, but I wrote it down. And then you also have to subtract off. So this is what it, let's say this is 1 inch. So you got to times that by 2, because remember, it's 2 patterns. Okay, so you're going to subtract that. So we'll say that's 2 inches from your total measurement. So what I usually do is just take this whole measurement, okay, times that by 2, subtract out the dart times 2. So we'll say that's 2 inches. And then you got to subtract out the seam allowance in commercial patterns. Most of them are 5/8, so you do 5/8 times 2. Okay, and you get that final number, and you do that for mainly for your waist, and you do it for your lower hip line. Not so much for the middle. You can.
Count.
1 second, baby. Can you do it yourself?
Mom, my brain can't do it, and I can't talk.
Oh no.
Not her.
1 second, y'all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Sorry about that. Because usually this works out itself as long as that lower hip line. But I usually also measure this as well, just to make sure, because I got a little poof in my tummy here. So just to make sure that that matches my measurement plus whatever ease I feel I need to be comfortable. Let's see. So when I did all these measurements, so this is the front, you got to remember to do the back, and you add them all together. So when I did that measurement, my lower hip was fine, upper hip was fine. My waist needs to be enlarged by 2 inches all together, so all around the whole pattern. So you got to divide that 2 inches or whatever that total is that you need to expand by 4. So that's a 1/2 inch on each side. So I need to add the 1/2 inch to the side here, and then blend it back to my lower, because I prefer not to add any here because this is fine. I don't need to add any here. So the idea is to blend it here, bend into the lower hip line, and remember I'm going to peg mine by about 2 inches to make it more of a pencil skirt. So that brought up that, you know, I know we did grading from one side to the other, but now we can do a tip video on enlarging. Now the max I say that you should enlarge is about 2 sizes worth. Other than that, some things in here in the middle of your pattern gets a little messed up. So no more than 2 sizes. And I want to say this was 3/8, this was a 1/2 inch. Usually they're equal, but this one isn't. And I want to say this was 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches. So it went from 3/8 to a 1/2 inch to, I want to say, 1.25 inches. So again, when you're adding, say you know it's 3/8 or something that you need to add, I would just say add something that's easy for you. So, you know, add the 1/2 inch all the way around on the side seam. And then when, you know, you do the final fitting, then you can ease that back in, because you do a final fitting before, you know, so you base your side seams, then you do a fitting, and then if there's any adjustments you need to make it tighter, make it looser, you do that along the side seam, never along anything else, only on the side seam. And once you get it to where you like it, then you permanently stitch it. So I will go ahead and show you how we can enlarge it. Okay, and that's pretty simple, and that'll be the next video. Okay, so basically what I did is just outlined the pattern. So the pattern is, you can kind of see it underneath. It's underneath. You look really closely, you can see the original pattern. See the markings. It's underneath, and I laid tracing paper over top, and all I did was outline you know, my size. And then remember, I have to add a 1/2 inch to each one of the pattern pieces, because I needed 2 inches in total on the waist. So divided that by 4, that's a 1/2 inch. And remember, these are your verification lines. So this is your waistline, this is your upper hip line, and this is your lower hip line. Now remember that my lower hip line was fine, upper hip line was fine, and this is the one that needed to add. And so just to give you a way of what I did, so you can kind of see it, and I'll tell you the calculator I used too, because I used fractions, and I use a fraction calculator just to make it easy and fast, because I like to use centimeters, I told you, but just to make it easy when converting from the pattern, making adjustments from the pattern, I just use the inches like they have. So this is my body measurement. BM is body measurements. And so for the waist is 40.5, and for woven with ease is 41. And we'll be going over mostly like the fabric I use, but pattern basically calls for woven type fabrics, and whenever it calls for a woven type fabric, I get a woven plus spandex. It just makes your outfit more comfortable, because it is a little bit of ease in there automatically. So there's a little bit of stretch on the crosswise grain. So whenever the pattern again calls for a woven, I typically get the woven plus spandex in there. So with the woven or the woven plus spandex, okay, I like to have 41, so a half an inch of ease on the waist, because you don't want this to be too big, because you want it to sit at the waist. You don't want it to sit down. And again, this is the natural waist, which is here. And I should, instead of that, I should say this is the straight or natural waistline here, and this is the shaped waistline. Okay, so what I do is take the back, and it's times 2, so I include the 2, so I add them up. So this is the back pattern, I want to say, yes. So what I do is take the waist measurement and then times it by 2, and that's what that is. That's what that number is. The front, do the same thing. Take it against the waist, times that number by 2 to get that number, minus out the darts. So the darts for the total of the front and the back was 4 1/4. Then minus out the seam allowance, because you got to remember along here, you're going to have, along your side seam, you're going to have 5/8 of an inch on each side. So remember, this is 2, this is only 1/2. So you got 2 backs. So you got to do it times 2. So really times 4, I'm sorry, times 4, because you're doing all sides of the pattern here, okay? It's the front and the back. And so 2 in the front, 2 in the back, there you go. So that's 4, so it's 2.5 inches. So you add this, 23.5 plus 22.5. Then you have to minus out your darts, minus out your seam allowance, and it gave me 39. I need at least really 40.5, but with ease, we're like 41. So that's where that 41 came in. Difference is 2 inches. Divided that by 4. Get a half an inch on each side. So I need to add a half an inch on each side, right? So on each pattern piece. So it's a half an inch on here, which one, since it's times 2, this will be 1 inch. Same thing on the front pattern. Okay, and if you like, I can, you know, post like a spreadsheet or something like that if you want to see that. So, so remember, my hip line is basically where I want it. So I don't want to add here. And remember, I'm going to be pegging in because I like it to be more of a pencil skirt instead of straight skirt, because this is more of a straight skirt. This is the pencil mark of at 2 inches. Just to let you know, I also do this part as well, because this is a half an inch. You know, remember when we do our kick plate? So I just do a guideline for me there. What else is different here? Your lengthwise grain line, usually it's arrows on the opposite side. So this one is pointing to the right, this one is pointing usually to the left. But the way I do it, because this is going the length of your pattern and the way it's going to sit on your body. So just in case you ever have directional type fabrics or patterns, I like to know what direction you know, to lay the pieces. So I always just do my markings in the direction that I want the pieces to lay, which is usually the direction that it's going to go on the body. Okay, so that's the reason why mine is, I just always do it just that way. Okay, so to add, all I did was extend the new waistline, or the shape waistline, out a little bit using the natural curve. So I just used the hip measurement, the hip ruler, I'm sorry. And I go on the inside using the inside of the hip ruler, and you know, just line it up along here and extend it. So it's lined up there, and then I just make a marking to extend it. Then what I do is measure out that half an inch. So that's the half an inch, and whoops, make a mark. Yes, babe. Okay, 1 second. And so at this point, what you do is just take your hip curve ruler, line it up against that mark there, okay? And then, since you don't want it to change at your lower hip line, you just make sure that it touches there. Okay, so it's lined up here. Let's line it up. Let me get it lined up for you, then I'll show you. So it's lined up there, right? So it's lined up. Make sure that it touches that lower hip line, okay? And just the natural way of this hip curve is just gonna automatically peg it for me. And if you run down the ruler, you'll see that it'll eventually hit that mark. It's just, I don't have to do anything weird with this ruler. It just automatically gives me a more of a peg skirt, or side seam. So now all you do is take your pen, and mark along there all the way down. And then when you get to here, you're gonna have to move it down some. So you just move it down and finish marking. And I'll do that and be right back. Okay, so this is the finish. So as you see, marked it. It gave me a little bit of smidge around here and a little bit of smidge at the upper hip line, but that's, that's fine. A little extra around your pooch area, won't hurt that. Going along, it matches up there at the lower hip line. Then it pegs in. You can see it's very close to with my 2 inches. Very fine with that. And I'll just go ahead and X off the old lines. So X off these old lines here. Transfer any markings to the new line that you have. And that's it. And repeat it on the front pattern. And on your facings pieces, you're going to have to add that 1/2 inch on there as well, because you remember your facings have to be the same size of your waist. Okay. So make sure to add it to your facing pieces, front and back, and that'll be it on how you go up a size. Okay, any questions on that? Let me know. Okay.